If I may give a plug for what we're doing, the Real Truth About Health, we actually have a number of speakers who reverse heart disease through lifestyle, and they're doing it all the time. We've had previous speakers like Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn,
Yes.
who've done it, and we've got a number of speakers. So I highly suggest that you check
Joel
out our
Kahn.
list.
Yes. Yep.
Yes.
Yes. There's a lot of people that do that. So please connect. And you know what bugged me was Joel Kahn told me that only less than 1% of the population goes to a cardiologist to get a screening, right? That's not good enough, folks. Like we need to know what's going on in our bodies so that we know how to take care of our bodies. That's the most important message I think I want people to know is know your body, get your testing done, metabolic testing, get your DNA testing done, get this heart test done, get whatever test done that you need to get done to know what's going on for you. Otherwise, you're throwing a bunch of expensive supplements at your body when you don't know if you even need it, And for instance, Cardio Miracle, I don't have to take 10 other supplements because they're all in Cardio Miracle, right? And so, and Cardio Miracle has been shown to help reverse heart disease, kidney disease, periodontal disease, and you can get that on momsacrossamerica.org as well.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if I may ask you, what is biomilk? Is this in the best interest of babies? And is it as good as nursing?
No, I would say that it's not. It's Bill Gates and Zuckerberg have come together, and it's one other guy. I forgot his name. Maybe Anne will remember. Couple of men, very wealthy men. Oh, Jeff Bezos, I believe, have come together to fund, milk that can be made in a lab that is not, it's not from mothers. I don't want to say it's another effort to eliminate women and mothers, but that's definitely a result that will happen if they're successful. They think that they will just be able to perpetuate the human race, without normal, sexual reproduction and pregnancy and all of that. And I do have to say, I think they're partially doing this because they can see the writing on the wall. They can see the problems. They can see the miscarriages that are happening. They can see the infertility. They can see that a lot of these babies are going to have to be grown in a lab. And when a woman can't conceive, and if she has a baby grown in a lab, she's going to need some form of breast milk, right? She's going to need, if she can't conceive and get pregnant, she's not going to be able to produce the milk for her lab grown baby. So I think they are looking down the road and trying to create a solution for this horrific problem that they may not be very smart in some ways, but they are smart in other ways. They can see what's happening to the human population. We are declining. We are not going through a human population boom like the GMO proponents say we are. In Japan, they're developing all kinds of robots because the projections of their human population, the births are declining so much that they're not going to have people to take care of the elderly. When the current population gets to be old, there's going to be nobody to take care of them, and so they're going to need robots. And so we don't have we don't have the human population boom that they're saying we're going to have. And so they're concerned about needing to, there's labs now that can grow babies, right? Like in pots. They're promoting that anyway, that they're going to be developing that. So when you grow a baby in a pod and not in a human mom, you're going to need breast milk for them. So I can see where they're going with this, but I am highly suspect that it would be healthy at all, considering, look at GMO soy in formula right now. It's loaded with junk. It's loaded with fructose and dyes and chemicals and, all kinds of things that are going to actually destroy the human biome. They're going to destroy the baby's immune system, and they're promoting vaccines that are supposed to be, boosting a baby's immune system, but they're actually destroying the baby's immune system. So these men simply, they may have good intentions, but they don't really know what they're doing. They really are perpetuating more problems, creating more problems, and the decline of the human race.
Thank you. And what do you consider ultra processed food, and what's wrong with ultra processed food?
Well, ultra processed food, I'm not a nutritionist, I have to say, but it simply contains way too many ingredients that are harmful for the health. They contain, highly processed oils, highly processed sugars, ingredients that are basically like garbage, cheap junk garbage. They may fill up your stomach and they may taste good, but they don't give you the nutrition that you need. And therefore you continue to be hungry and you continue to eat more of that product or other products that are harmful for you. And what you end up having is a feeling of eating and being satiated because of the taste, but your body is not satiated as far as nutrients go. And I want to bring up a story about, I mentioned the hamsters, right? And the violence that was stopped, was halted when those hamsters were given vitamin B3. Well, there's a book called Food. I'm going to grab it right now. I always have this by me because it's one of the most important books out there. It's called Food and Behavior: The Natural Connection by Barbara Stitt. She's a Lifetime Achievement Award winner. And she studied parolees and criminals and high school dropouts, people with, basically undesirable behavior, violent behavior in society. And she got an award for this because what she found was that the number one thing that all of the serial killers and parolees and criminals had in common was not their socioeconomic background or their race, as some people might think. It was the fact that they bragged that they lived on junk food. They ate things like, I guess I can't name brand names, but they ate junk food, frozen foods, things you put up in the microwave, sodas, candy, chips, all of that stuff. They brag, that's it. They lived on it. They're like, oh, all I eat is, this kind of soda and that kind of pizza or this kind of Hot Pockets or this kind of whatever, like they just brag that they lived on junk food. And so what happens then is that your brain doesn't get the nutrients, especially the prefrontal cortex, where you have your decision making. It's devoid of vitamin B's, actually, is one of the most important ones. And then those brain neurons don't connect and make decisions the way they're supposed to. And what she found was when she put those prisoners on a whole food diet, fresh foods, she took the sodas out of the schools and out of the prisons. And when she took those sodas and junk foods and all of those out and gave them whole, healthy, fresh foods, for instance, the high school went from a school of 5,000, they had 500 kids that would drop out every year. It went down to 14 in 1 year. And the prisons, the recidivism rate switched. Instead of 70% going out and coming back to prison, 70% would go out and stay out of prison. They would not come back. Only 30% would come back. And so her studies have shown that eating a healthy whole food diet, and at the time she didn't know it, but I don't think, but they were avoiding GMOs and glyphosate. But just because they weren't labeled in the food supply, the study was done in the late 90s. And so by doing that, by switching your food out, you support your body and your brain to function properly, better, and to make better decisions and to live a more productive life and to contribute to society. And that's what we all want for each other and for our children.
Thank you. So what does the term GMO 2.0 mean? And why does Jeffrey Smith say it is creating an existential threat to humanity? Is that
well, I mentioned that a little bit earlier. CRISPR is really what they call, GMO 2.0, gene editing, and CRISPR. But he also does refer to the microbe, the genetically modified microbes, as I already mentioned. But the thing about CRISPR that's very concerning, and gene editing and gene drives are when you can epigenetically engineer something and it will affect all future generations. Like, for instance, they could genetically engineer mice to have blue eyes, and then all of the babies will have blue eyes after that genetic, engineer. So you can imagine what would happen in humans if people decided, that a certain look for a certain race was superior and they started genetically engineering for that. And also there was a movie, my goodness, I forgot what it was called now, but it was all about CRISPR and gene editing. And there was a man on there who was doing gene editing CRISPR in his garage. You can buy the kit for, I don't know if it's $60 or $160, something like that. And he was genetically engineering dogs to like glow in the dark or something like that. And he admitted at the end of the movie that mother dog had like 14 different miscarriages, like pregnancies where they just kept dying. The babies just kept dying, and that he was not successful in making it happen. And so my concern is that, this tinkering with life, whether it's human life or animal life, is causing reproduction. I mean, causing repercussions that are tragic and that are abusive, right, to these animals and to the plants. It causes them to do things like toughen up. Like, for instance, they genetically engineered alfalfa. So we should be on the lookout for. We do not want GMO wheat. By the way, I think it was Brazil or Argentina that did approve some GMO wheat for in a small area. But the GMO alfalfa that was approved, I talked to a farmer that fought that and went to the Supreme Court to fight that GMO alfalfa release, and they won in the Supreme Court. But then one of our government officials, is his name Michael Taylor? I'm sorry, my brain is not remembering that right now, but he overturned that and approved. I don't know how you could overturn the Supreme Court, but he went ahead and approved GMO alfalfa anyway. And this farmer, Pat Trask, told me that when that alfalfa was genetically engineered, it toughened up. It's kind of like, if you cut something, it's going to form a scar, right? It's going to react. It's not just going to do nothing. And so this alfalfa toughened up. And instead of having more protein, which is what the farmers want, it had more fiber. And that, to them, it's like eating junk food. They don't want more fiber. They want more protein for their animals to grow fat and, big. You have to have some fiber, of course, but yeah, it is. So they did not want GMO alfalfa because also it would propagate. It would just go everywhere. It's a perennial too, right? So it would just keep growing every year and they wouldn't be able to get it out of their system. So they really fought that. And so my point is that these GMOs, there are reactions, and in this case, in the alfalfa, it had more fiber, it toughened up, it was less desirable. And that was exact opposite of what they intended. And thank you, Anne. The movie that I'm talking about with this guy who's trying to genetically engineer dogs to glow in the dark was called Unnatural Selection. It's on Netflix.
Okay. And that's on Netflix, you said. So can you explain what mRNA vaccinology in livestock means, and what about mRNA in the food supply?
Yeah. So, again, I'm not a scientist, so I can't really talk exactly about the mRNA, the function of it, as well as, for instance, maybe Stephanie Seneff would. You should watch our previous episode we did yesterday if you want to hear her explanation on that. But from what I know, mRNA vaccines have actually been in our meat since 2018. They started using them in pigs in the swine flu vaccine. So I'm not going to say just because it's okay, it ought to be, right? To me, it's not okay, but the mRNA technology does alter, the RNA. It alters the cells of the body and in ways that we do not know how they're going to, alter the rest of the body or the function of the body. And I'm very concerned about this mRNA technology that they are now saying is going to be injected into our beef cattle. They're going to be requiring our cattle to have that injection. And what I am happy to see is that there are many farmers, ranchers like White Oak Pastures, for instance, that have put out videos saying that they will not use the mRNA vaccine on their cows. And I would venture to guess that probably all organic farmer, maybe not all, but if they're big corporations, but all the organic farmers I know personally would not use the mRNA vaccine on theirs. So I would say it's a pretty safe bet if you continue purchasing organic or grass-fed meat products, that you're not going to have to worry about that. But the main thing is ask them, know your farmer, ask them if I would imagine if they got 10 people, let's just say a certain medium-sized, meat producer got 10 people to email them or call them and say, hey, are you going to be using this mRNA vaccine? They would eventually put on their website, we are not using the mRNA vaccine. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't take that many people for that to be to contact them, to be concerned about an issue, for them to address it. So I would just do that. Ask them.
And what is the purpose of the mRNA? Is that to combat the disease, like the viruses that these animals?
Yes. Yeah. And what they can do with it is to combat specific diseases, right? They genetically engineer it so it can go after specific diseases and make it's supposed to be very selective and very effective, and train the body to produce the antibodies to go after and attack it. Again, I'm not a scientist, but it's just it's another new solution for them that they see as progress without having proof that it's safe. And there are reports of people who have injected, and many of the cows died afterwards. So, I mean, that's not a good sign, you know.
No, no, definitely not. So would would that be considered organic though? An animal that was injected with mRNA? Would that, if we got organic meat, would that mean that it did not contain the mRNA vaccine?
I believe there's no regulation saying that they can't. But I'm not good. I'm going to say that I'm not sure, totally sure about that. I've heard somebody be very definitive about this recently, and I think what they said, if my memory is correct, that organic farmers could inject their animals with the mRNA vaccine because there's no regulation saying they can't, right? And so what some activists are doing are saying we've got to contact, these different livestock growing associations and tell them it needs to be written down and required, right? That it is not allowed, that organic must exclude, just like when you go to the organic standards board, NOSB, National Organic Standard Boards meeting, there's activists there like Alexis Baden Mayer has to be dragged out by her ankles and her feet because, she doesn't want certain products to be allowed in organic, right? And she's done this for decades. So when something new comes in the market like mRNA, it's allowed until it's not allowed, right? But that doesn't mean that it's there, because most organic farmers have no interest in, introducing, unknown genetically modified substances into their cattle. They're not interested in that.
And what are some of the things that people would assume would not be in organic, like that this woman was fighting against, that actually is allowed to be labeled as organic?
Well, carrageenan used to be allowed in organic, and then I believe it wasn't for a while, and it may be allowed again. I'm sorry, I'm not up on that, but I know that because my son had a carrageenan allergy, and he would eat organic chicken, and his mouth would break out in a rash. I'm like, what is going on here? And then I saw that it had carrageenan in it, and my iridologist that I took my son to, who checked the iris, that she was the only one that could tell us that he had a carrageenan allergy, and it was confirmed when I saw that he had a reaction after he ate organic chicken meat, lunch meat that had carrageenan in it. And so that's something that, a lot of people may or may not care that it's inorganic, but, a lot of people fought to get it out of organic. And for a little while it was not allowed, and it may be allowed back in again. I'm not sure. I don't remember. There's so much. I'm sorry, Michael. There's so much information that some of this stuff is starting to either slip on me or I haven't kept up with, because there's just so much going on in the food supply right now. So much.
No need to apologize. You definitely know a lot of stuff, and we appreciate that. So let's end with how do you and how should other people go about inspiring people to step up and make a difference in the areas that you've spoken about?
Well, I try to inspire people. I don't know. I guess I would say by just becoming aware, by learning more and looking at what you can do. And I'll give an example in closing. My eldest son, Ben, was about 9 years old, and he had been experiencing rashes around his mouth, like a red line, almost like a clown mouth, like it looked like being sucked on by a vacuum cleaner. And his lips were red and swollen and cracked and bleeding. And this had been going on for 2 weeks at a time for 7 months on and off. And we took him to 6 different doctors, and they all just wanted to slap a cream on it, and it made it worse. It just would not go away. And he sat at the kitchen table one day and looked at me and said, "Mom, I wish all my allergies would just go away." And I said, "Me too, buddy." But in my head, I was thinking, that's never going to happen. And that was because the doctors had told me his food allergies were only going to get worse, especially his nut allergy. It could kill him with it, increased exposure. And then I realized what my brain was saying. I heard myself like that, saying that's never going to happen. And I was like, wait a second, I'm not committed to that. I'm committed to being courageous and creative and making a contribution in the world. Like that's sort of like the possibility that I created for myself. And so I said, I'm going to take another look at that, because I don't want to be a victim. I don't want my son to be a victim and be like, look at him as small, right? As somebody who can't do anything about that. And I thought about my cousin, Sarah, who had gone gluten-free. And then after a year, she was able to eat a piece of birthday cake or a piece of pizza at a birthday party. And I thought about her, and I told my son about her. I said, would you like to? You're like, one day, maybe a year from now, eat a slice of pizza at a birthday party? And he said, yes. And I said, well, then would you be my partner in your health? Would you drink green drinks and try alternative things like, acupuncture or Chinese herbs or whatever? He said, yes. And I said, then you've got a deal, buddy. And I stuck my hand out and shook his hand and said, I promise you, you will get better. Now, that was scary for me because I really didn't know how he was going to get better. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew that if I made a promise to my son, if I put my word on the line, I would step up and take actions that I never would have taken before. And my son, in partnership with me, right, would take actions that he had never taken before. And we did. We went GMO free within 4 months. His rashes were dramatically reduced. They only lasted 2 or 3 days, and it was only a faint pink line under his lip when he was exposed again. And a year later, when he was eating all organic because his other brother had those, autism symptoms, and we went 100% organic, we retested him, and his allergy levels went from a 19 down to a 0.2. Wow. And he is adamant. He will only eat organic. If we go out to a restaurant where there's no organic food, he will not eat. He will have a glass of water, maybe, right? And he eats an organic, whole food, plant-based diet. He has not been to the doctor since for any reason, for anything other than a sports checkup. That's it. He's one of the when we got COVID, he coughed for a day and fell asleep. I mean, he coughed like 2 times that day and slept that day. And then that was it. He was up and about the next day. He's like probably one of the healthiest people I know. And he inspires other people. He's done talks at churches. He wants to be a nutritional scientist. He wants to be going to school for that and be a health coach someday. And, that gives me a huge amount of peace of mind. So I would say to people, and I remember, by the way, during that exchange, one thing I didn't mention was I had a moment in my head where I said, I don't care if I have to eat birdseed with my son. He's going to get better. You know what I mean? I had that moment. I made a very distinctive choice that this kid is going to get better. I'm going to do this with him. So that's really the main thing is just choose health. And the real truth about health, right? Choose health instead of choosing ignorance. Choose discomfort instead of choosing comfort, right? Choose action instead of inaction. Choose to make a promise to yourself. Make a promise to somebody else. Put your word on the line because that's all we have is our word. And that's all we have is relationships for real in life. We don't have things. They could all be gone in a second in a storm or whatever, right? All we really have is our word and our relationships. So choose health and you will create health. That I promise you.
Great. Thank you so much, Zen. This has really been informative and inspiring. Yeah. So the audience, I'm sure, would like to share their thanks and appreciation for you taking your time. So we're going to open up the mics and hear a cacophony of thanks.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone.